Well, my friends, thank you for using this Fat Man's revisitation of the Twilight 2000, continuing with the ruins of Warsaw series module. And as I said, this is part of a section, the Vistas, and this is the continuing one. Follows. Uh, Game Designer's Workshop. This was designed by William H. Keith and Timothy Brown, published in 1985. Which would have been the year I graduated. I would have been 18 years old when this was coming out. And there goes the timer for the bacon. Yay! The Ruins of Warsaw, introduction. And note, players should not read it any further in this booklet in order to preserve the element of surprise. I've always had mixed opinions on that. I'm of the opinion that if the player has spent the money to purchase any kind of game material books, they have every right and reason to read it. Whether or not they choose to apply this stuff as out-of-game knowledge is debatable, but by all means, they should invest in it if that's their thing. Adventure plots. Following background assume the characters at the Twilight 2000 campaign, the material may blah 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 blah. Or survivors, the blah blah blah. We all know that part. Rose wandered south to Krakow, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Due to circumstances mostly beyond our control, a hasty retreat was in order. Player characters took on one Adam Radke up on his offer to travel down the Whistle of Warsaw toward his tugboat, the Whistle of Corolla. The journey was indeed difficult, as every bandit and marauder along the way did their best to sink or capture the tug. Finally, they made contact with Kazoo Lud in the floating city, and with their help defeated the river pirates headed by Baron Czarny. Adam's now poised to evacuate his family from the ruins. However, he finds instead of his family members are not about to leave their new home, instead wish to fight it out with the Baron, no matter how unlikely their victory. They can use every bit of help they can get, including Adam and the crew of the Corolla. Module provides all pertinent information along this state of blah blah blah. Through the rubble. So basically, we've arrived at Warsaw, or the outskirts of Warsaw. We give us the information on what's going on. Adam's family, winter's coming, so everything is in a state of rush. What people have managed to plant, they are harvesting or have harvested, and the Baron has not supplied enough material for his army, and he's smart enough to really realize that, and see if there's a great deal of food, other supplies, his army will disperse to the countryside before the winter arrives. As it is, the Baron extorts only enough food to maintain it, so you don't have to store any. So he's not a forward thinker. He has one big gun. He's found himself a 122 millimeter D30 howitzer from one of the Soviet units he fought early in the war, but only has a handful of heavy HE rounds left, and is trying to obtain more. That's critical because that's part of one of the secondary adventures, is the convoy where he's traded some supplies or weapons, materials to a Soviet military unit in exchange for more rounds. An additional 24 rounds of chemical blood agent rounds at that. And roused in a heavily guarded caravan, which is something that player characters can attempt to ambush and prevent him from getting these things, which would probably be a good idea. You don't want to be dealing with chemical stuff. Running the adventure, the timetable talks about Adam's family and his son, and his grandson, organizations. Then we get into the ruins of Warsaw, history before the war. What's left of it, existing communities, explains the map and moving through the ruins, encounters. Now, speaking of encounters, there was some discussion and debates on one of our channels a couple weeks, or 3 or 4 weeks ago, about whether or not encounters are important or even desirable, and that some people were of the opinion that they're a waste of time and or shouldn't be used, because ideally any encounter was something that was preconceived or pre-staged by the GM. And while I agree to that to a certain point, and in this case all that work's been laid out for you, but they've still allowed for enough random options to extend gameplay if that's your goal, or to give a little bit more variety and even a little bit of surprise factor even for the GM. So it's possible to have other things other than what's going on. It wasn't practical for these people to create every single possible scenario. So having encounters for the dogs, for example, you just look up the stats for the dogs and you have a deal with it. You either deal with it or you don't deal with it. So, you know, it talks about it as per Twilight 2000, civilian, rebels, marauders. It's there. Utilize it or don't utilize it. It's a matter of how you want to do it. The city of Praga, this place that Adam's family is basically become leaders of the community, and they've done well for themselves over the last 2 years, except now they're running into problems with this guy named the Baron, who's giving them an ultimatum. Basically, he wants everything they have, and they're not going to give it up without a fight. Talks about their outfits, their limited military units, and how they've organized them, what reserves they have for ammunition. And we get into various towns, and in this case would be suburbs and or city districts that survived the Holocaust, the nuclear attack to some degree or another, and some that have not. So there's some areas as Warsaw players are really going to wish to avoid, if no other reason, to avoid taking additional rad damage. Talk about these individuals, these various districts, their backgrounds for them, their maps. Then we get into the section on the Baron himself and some of his flunkies, his goals and his means, and what he's planning. So our first option, our first opportunity, our first mission is the ambush. Either try to destroy the gun itself, destroy the munitions, the existing munitions, or ideally take out the convoy of bringing in the additional stuff. Either way, we want to prevent those chemical warheads from being utilized, because it can complicate things and potentially wipe out that whole community that they're trying to save or rescue. We have the information on the convoy. We also have a breakdown of the Baron's forces and his reserve for his ammo reserves and who the leaders are. Basic stats and an overview of Warsaw. This is an internal city map. You can see with existing roads that still are functionable. The gray areas represent rebel. These areas represent trees. Some of these streets are still functional. Some of them are cut off and buried. So moving through the rebel can be a problem. Fortified enclave. Existing overview map. Once again, these were section maps or section pieces that were intended to be pulled out of the books and utilized in play. And because I never played the game system, I never took them out, and they never got lost. Lesson there: if you come with this, if your books, and most books now, if they come in a box set, these things are in the box and they're separate, which can be a problem too. But these were never sold as a box. This is how you purchased what you purchased. So these add-on sections were important and much easier to lose. I'm an advocate of leaving them in the supplement and copying them out. It just is. Once again, the outlying communities and their opinions or allegiance to the Baron, or their opposing the Baron. You know, some of what they're capable of. Some of these, with a little bit of creative diplomacy, could be recruited to help with the upcoming battle against the Baron, because he's going to want to whack and get rid of you guys, your people, for sure. And a nice overview map of the areas to the east. And we have this map over here, basically the river valley that goes on up to Krakow, which may be the reverse trip. So if once this is concluded and your group decides they want to return to Krakow because that's what they want to keep playing out of, well, obviously we get the Pirates of Vista out and take it in reverse, but we'd make adjustments for a lot of the chaos and or destruction that was created on the trip down. So you might have a different set of bandits and bad guys, different communities. A lot of them might be gone. Fewer river pirates and what have you because of the organization being destroyed. Various militant units, the Soviet 10th Guard Division, what's left of it, which ironically enough is a potential ally. They're looking for a place to winter, plus the general's savvy enough to know that the continuing to fight in the larger picture of things is just suicidal, and that the world's pretty much gone to the bat, and to hell in a basket, and he's done with it. He's broke away from the Soviet high command, so at some point in the distant future, he might actually come into conflict with another Soviet Union Warsaw Pact units to come in to try to bring them back into the fold, so to speak. But he's also been encouraged to join. He's giving the opportunity to be recruited into the good guys' side against the Baron for the exchange for the right to come in and bivouac for the winter and coexist, which down the road could cause problems when it comes spring with the warlords, but players may not still be around to worry about it. Preparing defenses, scouting around, getting prepared for the big coming battle, the Baron's timetable, the map, running the battle, dealing with the 10th Guard Division. Quotes on the Vistula, evacuation, gas masks, ending the adventure. The gas mask. Due to the nature of the ensuing battle, gas masks will become very important. Not all troops on either side possess proper defenses against chemical agents. In the militia, there are only a limited number of gas masks available, which have been distributed among the various troops. There are also several full chemical suits. These are listed in the militia order of battle. In the other communities of Warsaw, there are only 10 or so masks per community. Generally, these should be assigned to leaders or to selected troops. Soviet 10th Guards Division is sufficient masks and suits for all of its personnel. Baron's army is equipped variously. Those units with masks or suits are listed in the order of battle. Ending the battle, evacuation. Then we got some basic rules of macro combat, i.e. large-scale combat, scale units, larger boats, initiative, combat. So, and what we're talking about in this case is where the player characters are basically a squad or a light platoon, and any movement on a battle map would be consisted of larger units. So we would have, we're talking, entire sections of 60 people. You either run them as a platoon scale, or you run them at squads. So if you run them at squad, potentially there's 5 to 10 squads to a 60-man platoon, depending on how you want to break them down. The U.S. military average squad with 8 to 10 people. Somebody in the military would have a much better understanding of how that worked out. And these troubled times where you don't have a full complement, it might be fewer, it might be more. And the platoon obviously is, a U.S. military platoon is fairly good size, and the company is made up of 3 to 6 platoons, depending on what scale you're going for. Spotting, combat, cover, hits and damage, rangefinders, chemical rounds, indirect fire, using that cannon, 4 leaders, what have you. There you have it. Ruins of Warsaw. Fairly good module, although it's mostly focused around saving this one part of the communities and reuniting these others against this Baron Czarny or whatever, and going from there. Let's see if we have any other options. That's the ambush. Battle for Warsaw. How many men do we have? Philippe queried Animus' nephew. Hardly enough. He replies, scarcely 350 men under arms right now. Nearly no vehicles, only limited infantry support weapons. With the Baron's gun, he can wipe out half our men before we even send his troops in. We'll take care of that, I spoke up. Actually, I figured our chances of stopping the convoy to be slim at best, but we wouldn't let on here. Morale in this place is low enough already. We know he's going to attack, we just don't know when. 300 men is quite a few to put in the field these days. Baron's forces must be numerous indeed to threaten such a militia. I'll make a note to be careful walking around out in the ruins. Step 1, making friends. Philippe is convinced it's the only way he'll be able to survive the attack of the Baron, and that is to make allies. There are several avenues open to him. Moktow, other communities, the Soviet 10th Guards Division. In mid-1999, the Soviets launched a series of small attacks. Following these attacks, most of the survivors of the 10th Guards and all of its equipment were withdrawn and used partially refit other divisions of the 1st Guards Tank Army. Headquarters of the division and a cadre of specialists were left intact and instructed to absorb newly mobilized replacements from the Soviet interior and rebuild the division. Most of the replacements never arrived, having mutinied or just deserted along the march. About 500 replacements did arrive, all on trade youths from Kyrgyzstan, none of which spoke Russian, and no one in the division spoke Kazakh. Training was a problem. For heavy firepower, the division received 12 tanks, antique T-55s with broken tracks, burned-out engines, and transmissions. The tanks arrived on tank transporters and were unceremoniously dumped at the division encampment. 2 weeks later, on April 8, 2000, Major General Kronov was ordered to move to the front lines to support the Polish Second Army. Kronov turned to the division political officer and asked, "What do you think? What should I do about this order?" The political officer shook his head. "The pigs in Kremlin have betrayed the revolution. Enough of the good communist boys have died. Tell them to go." Deleted. Kornilov smiled. General Kornilov's troops will be the most help to Philip and the militia. The division itself is no longer any armored vehicles and is down to strength of mere 300 foot soldiers. Captain Joan Stone of the CIA is also with the unit, but only in advisory capacity. As yet, no other pro-U.S. forces have linked up with this unit. The general is simply interested in the well-being of his unit. In fact, he and the militia of Sleece are fighting the same foe, merely gains him an ally in this manner. Spring of 2001, the general will be off to the south with his unit hopefully intact. His interest in Sleece is purely military. He's trying to survive the winter. So, pretty much straightforward. There you have it. Ruins of Warsaw. Nice set of modules. Go in tandem with the Pirates of the Vista.